It was a dull, overcast day in London, and Sherlock Holmes had just returned to his apartment after a morning stroll through the city. As he entered the sitting room, his trusted friend and colleague, Dr. John Watson, greeted him. "Good morning, Holmes. Did you have a pleasant walk?" "Quite," Holmes replied, hanging up his coat and hat. "But now I have a feeling that we are in for some excitement." "And why is that?" Watson inquired. "Because I have just received a telegram from my brother Mycroft," Holmes explained, holding up the piece of paper. "He has a rather intriguing assignment for us." "Well, let's have a look then," Watson said, his curiosity piqued. Holmes read the telegram aloud. "Urgent request for assistance from the British government. Secret war project against China. Stop. Mycroft." Watson whistled. "Sounds like quite a task. What's our first move?" "I must meet with Mycroft and get more information," Holmes replied. "I believe this could be an opportunity to put our skills to the test." "I'm ready when you are," Watson said, grabbing his coat. Holmes and Watson made their way to the Diogenes Club, where Mycroft held court. As they entered the ornate building, Mycroft approached them, looking grave. "Gentlemen," he said, nodding curtly, "I'm afraid this is a matter of the utmost secrecy." "We understand, Mycroft," Holmes said, his eyes glittering with anticipation. "What can you tell us?" Mycroft led them to a private room and closed the door behind them. "The Chinese have been developing a new weapon of war, one that could change the balance of power in the world. We need to stop them before they can deploy it." "And what do you need us to do?" Watson asked. "You will be working directly with the Prime Minister and the War Office to gather intelligence and stop this project in its tracks," Mycroft explained. "I cannot stress enough the importance of secrecy in this matter. The fate of the entire country could be at stake." "We understand," Holmes said, his mind already racing with possibilities. "When do we start?" Watson asked, eager to get to work. "Immediately," Mycroft replied, handing them a file of documents. "Study these carefully. They contain everything we know about the Chinese project so far. And remember, gentlemen, time is of the essence." With that, Mycroft left the room, leaving Holmes and Watson to pore over the papers and begin their mission. "So what's the plan, Holmes?" Watson asked, looking up from the documents. "We'll need to start by gathering intelligence," Holmes replied, leaning back in his chair. "I believe we'll need to employ a bit of subterfuge to get the information we need." "And how do you propose we do that?" Watson inquired. "I have a few ideas," Holmes said with a sly smile. "But first we'll need to find a way to get close to the Chinese spies who are working on this project. And that, my dear Watson, is where the real adventure begins." Sherlock had never been one to shy away from a fight. In fact, he relished the opportunity to test his physical prowess against those who thought they could best him. And so, when he found himself facing down a group of armed spies in the heart of London, he didn't hesitate for a moment. It was a warm summer evening when Sherlock received a tip from his sources that a group of foreign agents had infiltrated the city. They were armed and dangerous, and their presence posed a serious threat to national security. Sherlock had been tracking their movements for weeks, trying to gather as much information as possible before making his move. But now, he knew that the time had come to act. As he made his way through the streets towards the suspected location of the spies' hideout, Sherlock could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He knew that he was about to face one of the toughest challenges of his life, but he was ready for it. As he turned the corner onto a narrow, dimly lit alleyway, he saw them. The spies were standing in a circle, their backs to him, as they chatted in hushed tones. They were all armed with guns and knives, and Sherlock knew that he had to act fast if he wanted to come out of this alive. Without hesitating, Sherlock charged towards the group, his fists raised in a fighting stance. The spies turned around just in time to see him coming, and they immediately opened fire. Sherlock dove to the ground, narrowly avoiding the barrage of bullets as they whizzed past his head. He scrambled to his feet, his mind racing as he tried to think of a way to take down the spies without getting shot. As one of the spies aimed his gun at Sherlock, he made a split-second decision. With lightning-fast reflexes, he lunged forward and grabbed the spy's arm, twisting it behind his back with brutal force. The spy screamed in pain as Sherlock held him in a vice-like grip. But Sherlock wasn't done yet. Using the spy as a shield, he charged towards the rest of the group, using his captive as a human battering ram. The other spies were caught off guard by Sherlock's sudden attack, and they stumbled backwards as he plowed into them. Using a combination of martial arts and brute strength, Sherlock quickly took down 2 of the spies, leaving only 1 left standing. The final spy was armed with a knife, and he lunged towards Sherlock with deadly intent. But Sherlock was ready for him. He sidestepped the attack and landed a devastating blow to the spy's head, knocking him unconscious. As the last spy hit the ground, Sherlock stood there, panting heavily, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. He knew that he had just narrowly escaped death and that the fight was far from over. But he was ready for whatever lay ahead, and he knew that he would stop at nothing to protect his country and those he loved. Sherlock and Watson returned to their lodgings on Baker Street, each lost in their own thoughts. The events of the past few days had left them both exhausted and on edge. They were both concerned about the mysterious attack on Sherlock and the implications it might have for their mission. As they entered the sitting room, Mrs. Hudson came bustling in with a tray of tea and biscuits. Sherlock poured himself a cup of tea and settled into his armchair. "Watson, I believe we have a new lead," Sherlock said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "What is it?" Watson asked, leaning forward in his chair. "I was doing some research on the Chinese ambassador, and I discovered that he has a nephew who is a known member of a secret society that operates in China. This society is known to engage in criminal activities, and they have connections to a powerful Chinese general. Do you think this secret society is behind the attack on you?" Watson asked. "It's possible," Sherlock said thoughtfully, "but we need more information. I think it's time we paid a visit to the Chinese embassy." The next morning, Sherlock and Watson made their way to the embassy. They were met at the gate by the ambassador's secretary, who escorted them inside to a small sitting room. After a few moments, the ambassador himself entered the room. He was a tall, imposing man with a stern expression. "What brings you here, Mr. Holmes?" he asked. "I'm here to discuss the recent attack on me and to see if we can work together to prevent any further incidents," Sherlock replied. The ambassador's expression softened slightly. "Of course. We are equally concerned about the safety of our diplomats and citizens." Sherlock leaned forward. "Ambassador, I have reason to believe that a secret society operating in China may be responsible for the attack on me. Do you have any knowledge of such a group?" The ambassador hesitated for a moment before responding. "I am aware of such a society. They are known to be involved in criminal activities, and they have connections to a powerful general in China." Sherlock raised an eyebrow. "Do you have any information on this general?" The ambassador leaned back in his chair. "He is a ruthless man, known for his ambition and his willingness to use any means necessary to achieve his goals. He is also very well connected and has powerful allies both in China and abroad." Sherlock nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you, Ambassador. You've been very helpful." As they left the embassy, Watson couldn't help but feel uneasy. "Sherlock, do you think we can trust the ambassador?" Sherlock shrugged. "Trust is a difficult thing to come by, Watson, but we have no choice but to work with him if we want to succeed in our mission." They returned to Baker Street, where Sherlock began to pore over his notes and research. Watson watched as Sherlock scribbled down notes and muttered to himself, lost in thought. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Sherlock leapt to his feet, his hand going to his revolver. Watson rushed to his side, his own weapon at the ready. "Who is it?" Sherlock called out. "It's me, Lestrade," came the reply. Sherlock breathed a sigh of relief and holstered his weapon. He opened the door to find the inspector standing on the doorstep, looking haggard and worried. "Sherlock, there's been a development. We've intercepted a message from the Chinese embassy. They're planning an attack on the British Navy." Sherlock's eyes widened. "When is the attack planned for?" "Tonight," Lestrade said grimly. "We need to act fast if we want to prevent any further attacks." Sherlock nodded, knowing that time was of the essence. He turned to Watson. "Come, old friend, we have work to do." With that, the 3 men left the room and headed out into the streets of London, determined to catch the perpetrators before they could cause any more harm. After the intense events of the past few days, Sherlock and Watson were both physically and mentally drained. They had spent countless hours poring over files and analyzing data, trying to uncover the details of a potential terrorist attack. But despite their best efforts, they still didn't have a complete picture of what was going on. Sherlock was restless, unable to shake the feeling that they were missing something crucial. He paced back and forth in their makeshift office, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "We need more information," he muttered to Watson. "We can't make a move until we know exactly what they're planning." Watson nodded in agreement. "But how do we get that information? We've already exhausted every source we have." Suddenly, Sherlock's phone rang. He picked it up and listened intently to the voice on the other end. "Who was that?" Watson asked, curious. "It was Mycroft," Sherlock replied. "He's managed to get us access to some classified documents that might be relevant to our case." With renewed energy, Sherlock and Watson rushed to Mycroft's office to review the documents. As they read through the pages, they finally began to piece together the terrorist group's plan. "They're going to launch a bomb attack on the Parliament," Sherlock exclaimed. "They're planning to cause destruction and chaos." Watson's eyes widened in alarm. "That's a serious threat. We need to stop them." Sherlock nodded in agreement. "But how? They'll have their best operatives working on this." "We have to think outside the box," Watson replied. "What if we could create a diversion, something that would draw their attention away from the Parliament?" Sherlock's eyes lit up. "That's it. We'll stage a fake target for the terrorists to attack. We'll create a false target that they'll think is the real deal, while we go after their own weak points." They quickly put their plan into action, setting up a fake target for the terrorists to attack. Meanwhile, Sherlock and Watson used their own skills to infiltrate the terrorist group and gather intel. As they worked, they could feel the tension mounting. They knew that any wrong move could mean the difference between success and failure. Finally, after hours of painstaking work, they had what they needed. They had uncovered the location of the terrorists' hideout, and they were ready to launch their attack. But as they prepared to make their move, they suddenly heard a loud explosion outside. Alarmed, they rushed to the window to see what was happening. Down below, they saw a truck loaded with explosives that had rammed into the Parliament building, causing massive destruction and chaos. They could see the panic and chaos on the streets as people tried to flee from the scene. Without hesitation, Sherlock and Watson sprang into action. They quickly made their way to the scene of the attack and started helping the victims, calling for backup and medical assistance. In the end, they emerged victorious, but not unscathed. Both Sherlock and Watson had suffered minor injuries, but they were relieved to have thwarted the terrorists' plan and saved countless lives. As they made their way back to their office, Sherlock couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. They had worked together to stop a major threat to their country, and they had done it with their own unique brand of intelligence and resourcefulness. "This is what we do, Watson," he said with a grin. "We solve problems, and we do it damn well."